like to join us in standing for a recitation of the Lord's Prayer, followed by a moment of silence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. It is now 7 o'clock. Shelby City Council meeting is called to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please. Roll call, Mr. Crum.
Mr. Robb.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Gates.
Here.
Mr. Martin.
Present.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Here. I now entertain the dispensing of the reading of the Journal of August 17, 2020.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Roberts to dispense with the reading of the Journal from August 17, 2020. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Robb.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
That motion passes. Now comes the time for public comment. I don't believe I have received any comment. Has anyone else seen any comment to be shared tonight during public comment at this council meeting? Mr. Martin.
Mr. William Given, president of BCC Ohio, will be available via phone to make comment on a resolution 40-2020.
Okay. Thank you.
Natalie, you got that phone number?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Courtesy, Mr. Esmond. Any other one? Anyone else with any comment? If not, we'll move forward to reports from standing and special committees. The Community and Economic Development Committee has a meeting scheduled for this afternoon. Councilman McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did meet this afternoon. To start off, I'd like to invite Ms. Jessica Griffin, our Economic Development Liaison, to stand up and give us a few talking points from her position.
Hello, thanks for having me tonight.
I'm going to state your name and address
Yes.
too. Just, please.
Jessica Griffin, my address, 1195 Smart Road, Mansfield.
Thank you.
A couple of things I wanted to go over with all of you. Way back at the beginning of the year when things were normal, we had appropriations and you all decided to fund a facade improvement program. So obviously the next week kind of things got strange, but once we got back, kind of everybody got back to open, we did decide to move forward with that program on a limited basis. So we had the ability to fund 2 facade improvement projects. And I'm happy to say that we have chosen 2, and they should be starting and likely finished by the end of the year, although we may have to be a little flexible since we lost all of spring. So you should see improvements to the Parrot Head, as well as the WRP accounting facade. So I look forward to seeing those finished projects. One other item that I've been working on with 2 separate businesses, Jobs Ohio is now offering a grant program that's really tailored to communities like Shelby. We've been beating the drum for a long time that, sometimes 100 jobs being a minimum is not realistic for a community like ours, but we need to celebrate and support the businesses that are offering, that are adding some jobs or adding efficiencies and building wealth in the community. So it seems that they finally heard that message and started what's called the Inclusion Grant Program, which is exactly that. It is built for businesses that are adding small number of jobs, but that makes a big impact on a local economy. So we've got 2 businesses in town who could qualify for that program. We're kind of walking through that process now. It's brand new, so we're kind of learning as we go, but pitching it to our regional partner, which is Team Neo, and then they will kind of take it to Jobs Ohio and see if we can get some state funding to support those projects. So more to come on that. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about tonight, which you guys will kind of go over later in your agenda, but just kind of wanted to give you an overview of the Chamber Grant Program so that you all kind of have at least a little bit of familiarity with it when you talk about it later on. So the way it is working, the Chamber is really the facilitator, administrator for the program. The county really kicked it off by giving $250,000 of their CARES Act funding to the program to get it started. So what it is aimed at is kind of our small businesses that quite frankly are struggling or have struggled as they were closed down for a period of time in March and then slowly kind of began to open in May. So the program on the back end, we kind of built the guidelines for it, which the mayor I think has a copy, and certainly you can get a copy on the Chamber's website of all the guidelines of the program, but essentially we're targeting companies with 20 or fewer FTEs, so an FTE is a full-time equivalency, so we basically said any part-time person counts as a half a person, a full-time 40-hour person is a person. So 20 or fewer FTEs, $1.5 million or under in revenue for 2019. They have been opened since September 1st of 2019 to qualify. And they obviously have to be in Richland County. So again, we started, kind of partnered with the county to get the program started. And then further, Mansfield has agreed to fund the program, which that their dollars will stay in Mansfield. And should you fund the program, your dollars would then stay in Shelby, so they would only go to Shelby businesses. The way that it will work is, once we get all the applications in, we've created a scoring rubric that really focuses on the companies that have a good chance of being viable post-pandemic world, that have, that are supporting employment in the county, and have kind of a revenue that makes sense, that's small enough that they maybe don't qualify for other things, but large enough to make a difference. So once those applications all come in, which the application period ends Sunday at 11:59 p.m., then we'll score them and the county money will all be distributed first, and then any municipalities that have, bought into the program or given money to the program, then their funds would go toward their businesses that were next on the list. So the goal is to cast a really wide net now and get as many applications as we can, and then hopefully as funding continues to come in, we can just continue to fund more businesses. So that's basically how it's going to work. We certainly have been getting applications hot and heavy. I think we're in the low hundreds at this point with, the rest of the week to go. So any questions about the program or how it would work or what it would look like if Shelby participated?
Mr. Martin?
I read through the contract stuff, and I see that all funds would be returned to the city, so it does seem that the funds would stay within the city. I guess the question I would have then is if we didn't participate, we would still be eligible for county funds, correct?
Yeah, all the businesses in Shelby would be part of the county pool, so they would be able to compete for those funds.
I guess how do we ensure then that we're not just swapping out money from what we would put into the program for what our businesses would normally get from the county pool anyways?
So that's kind of why we did the funding structure the way we did it. So the top scoring businesses will use county funds until those funds are exhausted. At that point, then there's all the businesses that are left that would not be funded otherwise. If there is municipality money and they're in your municipality, they would then be funded.
Can you speak then to the scoring mechanism?
Yes, there is a rubric that weights the scores based on, like I said, kind of how long the company's been in business, how long the owner has been in that line of business, so that speaks to kind of their viability post-pandemic. It asks for the 2019 revenue numbers, then their year-to-date 2020 revenue and expense, asks about how many employees they have. So all of those are factored in. Now there are two separate categories. There's your sole proprietors or your solopreneurs, and then your 2 employee and up businesses. And those are separated into 2 categories and sorted separately, because that employment number matters for the 2 and up, but really for a solopreneur it's not so much, because there's just the one of them or 1.5. Sometimes the spouse is a bookkeeper or something of that nature. But so all of that's factored in. There is on the county side, and this wouldn't matter so much on your city funds if they were part of it. On the county side, it is weighted by distressed zip code. So the more distressed area, the area that the business is in is weighted a little higher. And then there are some points given for diversity. So a disadvantaged business, whether it be minority-owned, woman-owned, veteran-owned, or LGBTQ.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Martin?
Are we in the distressed zip code?
Yes.
Mr. Gates?
What defines distress?
Where we got our distressed zip code list was Jobs Ohio actually created it for their grant program, and we used what they had, and it's escaping me their source, but there is a source I can share with you that shows you where the distressed zip codes are, and then they're indexed. So there's some that are more distressed than others.
If I remember correctly, I believe the enterprise zones were based on that same
Correct. Yep,
criteria.
the same index that was used for enterprise.
Mr. Martin?
You had mentioned that distressed zip codes and diversity weights apply to the county grants. Do those same weights apply to our city grants?
The disadvantaged businesses would apply. The distressed zip code would obviously all be the same for your city grants, so it wouldn't really matter.
Then what about the diversity weights?
That would factor into their scoring. So they're going to score maybe slightly higher if they're a disadvantaged business. So the funds would go to the highest scoring businesses first until the funds are exhausted.
Okay, I'm sorry. You spoke initially of diversity weight, but now the disadvantage. Can you speak to that? I'm
I guess I'm using those interchangeably, which is probably not appropriate.
Okay, that's the confusion part on me.
So there's several components that come up to the total score, the
Yes.
weighted score at the
Yes.
bottom. at
Yes,
the end of the
each
day.
category is scored and weighted. With I think the most weight being given to their financial situation and the experience.
And we may be getting a little bit ahead of all this because this probably would have been discussion with the legislation, but it is good to have that overview. And again, my hat is off to the chamber for, and I'm sure there's some templates across the country, but really pulling all this together in such a short period of time. There's a lot of work. And I've got some of the samples, we have the questionnaires and so forth. And there's a ton of work into that already. So, thank you. Pass our thanks on. Okay. All righty.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I have a few more things.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. To continue on, Christina Jane, during the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, would like me to pass on a few things that they've done in the last couple of months. The public hearing will be conducted September 18th at 9 a.m. at City Hall to consider adding the bandstand in Memorial Central Park and the Shelby Oakland Mausoleum as Shelby locally designated historic landmarks. Once approved, the landmarks will be presented to the City Council for final approval. If approved, it will be the first locally designated landmarks in Shelby. There are currently 28 contributing structures to the Shelby Center Historic District and 55 structures on the state inventory. Next, the commission is currently reviewing the list of structures on the National Register. They're working to design a window cling that can be placed in storefronts to bring more awareness to the historic buildings. Many property owners do not realize they own historic property. And then finally, the commission is still looking for a replacement for Gary Bly. The position can be filled by someone who does not live within the city limits. That is all she'd like me to pass along, and that is all I have.
Okay.
Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. McLaughlin in his, in regard to his report? Hearing none. Thanks again. We'll move forward to Public Works and General Operations Committee. Councilman Rob.
The Public Works and General Operations Committee met on the 25th. It was a very short meeting with only one item on the agenda discussed, and that was the demolition of the old ice plant. And the information given by Mr. Geis was the bids would be open on October 2nd. That's pretty much the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. Are there any comments or questions from Mr. Rob in regard to his report? Hearing none, we'll move forward to Safety Committee. Councilman Roberts.
Yes, sir. Safety Committee met on September 2nd. Fire news, Chief Thompson reported the civil service, there will be a civil service meeting on September 9th to certify 6 applicants in order to hire a new firefighter. And they're going to start training on their new Marks radios that they got in. And when all the training is complete, they will switch over to that system. There's a lot of technical stuff with these new radios. He said it's not a radio, it's a computer. So he's hopeful that it won't take very long to get trained, but then as soon as they're trained, they're going to switch over to that system. So in health news, at the time of our meeting, there were 56 cases of COVID, with 53 recovered, and now that school started, they're keeping in close contact with the school system to make sure that for all the reporting on that. Police news, the department will also certify 2 applicants at the civil service meeting, and should have a fully staffed police officers by the end of the month, and the new dispatcher should start on the 17th. So hopefully by the end of September, we'll have everybody at the police department where they need to be. And they're going to have a jail inspection, but due to COVID, that annual jail inspection will be a self-assessment. So Captain Rath is working hard on that to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Are there any comments or questions in regard to his report? I might make one comment. As of this morning, actually, we have reached 0 active cases in the city of Shelby. So at this point, that's where we're at. Thankful for it. We'll move on to reports of city officials. The mayor's report. Begin with these few simple words. Since our last council meeting on September 17th, been occupied with various mayoral duties, committee meetings, commission meetings, meeting with department heads, answering phone calls, reviewing and returning emails, and various administrative decisions. And since our last meeting, I also participated in 2 interviews with potential employees in our safety forces, and that has come to bear good fruit. On August the 20th, we held a mayor's staff meeting via Zoom, and the chief topic, of course, was coronavirus relief funding. August the 21st, the Shelby Historic Preservation Commission held a ribbon cutting ceremony dedicating an historical marker for the Shelby Center Historic District. And thank all those who came, and thank Councilman Gates for sharing his experience and wisdom on that morning. We also held that very same day a successful bid opening for the East Main Street Sewer Project. On September the 1st, the Board of Health met to review various health issues and our current accreditation efforts, which are proving to be difficult here in this initial stage. So we're working hard to get things in place over the next 3 weeks or so. Some things that did not meet with the first approval, apparently. September the 2nd, representatives from the Marvin Memorial Library came to City Hall to prepare a brief video entitled Coffee with the Mayor. So I think that's going to be put online, I believe, Thursday of this week. So it was a nice experience. So that is my report. Are there any comments or questions for me in regard to my report? If not, we'll move forward then to Mr. Brian Crum, Director of Finance.
Thank you. Mostly normal operations in my department. Obviously, we spent a lot of time working with the various department heads for the CARES Act funding and uses for those, as you see a lot of legislation on that. We also met with R.W. Baird, the company that is assisting us with the refunding process for the bonds. We are moving along with that. We kind of had a meeting to go over the presentation that we will have to give in order to get a bond rating, or a new bond rating, and just moving through that process. It does move fairly swiftly, so I will keep you apprised of our progress there. Those are the major activities. I would like to thank Mr. Ensman and Mr. Geis. They assisted us a lot with a flood insurance process with the utility building. It's very expensive to have flood insurance on buildings in floodplains, but Mr. Geis brought to our attention that the new maps had taken that building out, and worked with those guys to get a new elevation certificate done and sent that to the insurance company, and knocked about $20,000 off the insurance premium. So thank you guys for your assistance with that process. That serves my report.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Crum in regard to his report? Mr. Martin.
Mr. Crum, you mentioned the CARES funding. How much has the city received?
We have received just over $297,000.
Mr. Martin.
And out of that $297,000, how much has been appropriated so far for usage?
We have not encumbered anything at this point. We have a list of our wants and some of our purchases that we feel do apply to that, but we haven't, nothing is set in stone yet.
Mr. Martin.
And how much in ballpark, and how much is that wish list that you have?
Well, it's a good question off the top of my head. You know, we have legislation to allocate $100,000 of that to economic development. Of the other $197,000, we're trying our best to use that wisely, but still for real purpose. You know, we don't want to be wasteful with the funds. I have to look at my notes again to tell you exactly how much of that we've come up with on our wish list, but it's pretty close to the $197,000.
But I think if you add up those items on orders number 22, 2020, I think it does come up. I think it's at a 280, something like that.
Yeah, that ordinance does list all of the funds that we received. We are entering all of those into appropriations. Yeah, and so that does come to the exact total of the monies we have received at this time.
I see nothing.
Yep, there we go. All right. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Crum? All right, thank you, Mr. Crum. If not, we'll move forward then to Mr. Eister, Law Director.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report this evening.
All right, no report from the Law Director. We'll move forward then to Mr. Joe Geis, Project Coordinator.
Thank you, Mayor. As you can see, the paving contractor has been in town. All the roads have their first scratch coat on. They were going to work on that today, but by the time the sun come out and dried it off, it had been well into the afternoon. So they took off today. They'll be back tomorrow. Finish up this week with the asphalt, then into next week with the adjustments of all the manholes, catch basins, water valves, and all those items. As the mayor said, we did open up the bids for the East Main Street Sewer Project, BK Layer. was the low bidder of $88,972. The estimate was $97,050. So they got a good price on that. And we've been working with the engineers and architects for the new K through 8 building. There, where the building lies, a sewer line would have to need to be moved, water lines and so forth. The plans were approved by our group here, and then they submitted to the EPA and have been approved. So the site work should start at that school building within 3 weeks or so. We still have not done the final zoning permit or anything like that, but they just wanted to get their site work going. They'll work on that through the winter and then probably start the building in the spring. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Geis. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Geis in regard to his report? If not, we'll move forward then to new business. Is there any new business that you have brought before council this evening? Hearing none, we'll move forward to unfinished business. The item of future use of Main Street Fire Station. There's no movement on that. We were informed early on that this would probably be a long process of a new parent company taking ownership there of community EMS. So we are still waiting word from them. Exterior property maintenance at 59 West Main Street. And we're encouraged to tell you that it looks like there is movement on that building, and looks like there could be a change of ownership here in the very near future. So that's good news at 59 West Main Street. And the other unfinished business, or any questions on those two topics? Hearing none, we'll move forward to legislation. Mr. Crum.
Ordinance number 19, 2020, amending chapter 1466, flood damage prevention, section 1466.24, use and development standards for flood hazard reduction, residential structures of the codified ordinances of the city of Shelby, Ohio.
Move for second reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Robb and a second by Mr. Roberts for the second reading of ordinance number 19, 2020. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Robb.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Ordinance number 19, 2020 passes its second reading.
Ordinance number 21, 2020, approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as parts of the various component codes of the codified ordinances, approving, adopting, and enacting new matter in the updated and revised codified ordinances, repealing ordinances in conflict therewith, and declaring an emergency.
I move that the rule requiring that an ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. McLaughlin that the rule requiring that ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended. Discussion. Mr. Robb.
These ordinances been reviewed by.
Why don't we, let's take care of this motion, then we'll go to the next. Are you wondering, does this have to do with the emergency part of it?
Yeah. Going to affect the way I vote on the motion.
Yes. It's just, yeah, standard updates we do every year we've done through the ordinances.
They've been reviewed by those that are going to affect, I mean.
To my knowledge, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I misunderstood. Any further discussion on the motion to suspend? Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Robb.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
The motion to suspend passes.
Move the ordinance be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin for the passage of ordinance number 21, 2020. Discussion. Mr. Gates.
Mayor, this is an annual update that we do. It's important. It's more than just housekeeping. It is important because by adopting this, then we have one volume that then contains the sum total of the ordinances of the city of Shelby as of December of last year. Of course, the legislative process marches on, but legislation. I think the last section 5, the boilerplate public health safety morals, and for the additional reason it is immediately necessary to have an up-to-date code of ordinances, one which is consistent with state laws required by the United Constitution and so on. It would be nice to know, I would be much more comforted by what happens in this room when we're not here, that indeed the judge has on the bench a copy of the sum total of the ordinances of the city.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Ordinance number 21, 2020 passes.
Ordinance number 22, 2020, amending ordinance number 8, 2020, annual appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Move the rule requiring that an ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. McLaughlin that the rule requiring that an ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended. Discussion? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, the window for the CARES money has opened very quickly and will slam itself shut very quickly. I believe I saw by October, I think I saw.
October 15th, yes, sir.
October 15th, yes, in section 4. So, you know, we are now about a month away from that. So that's the reason for the emergency clause here.
So, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to suspend? Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
The motion to suspend passes.
Move the ordinance be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin for the passage of ordinance number 22, 2020. Discussion. Mr. Gates.
Mayor, this is a supplemental appropriation. My colleagues will recall that the last council meeting, we created the fund, the local COVID virus relief fund. And now we are starting to put some flesh on those bones. We do have a certificate of resources, certificate from the finance director, $297,508. I understand that he did go to the county budget commission and got an amended certificate. So once we have a certificate from the budget commission, then we can appropriate within those limits. And so that's what brings us here. I had briefly had a discussion. You'll recall, Mayor, you were standing in the doorway. The finance director, the deputy finance director, and I, the 4 of us were together and discussed how we wanted to do this. My suggestion is we think about as many line items as we could, rather than put everything under 531 miscellaneous. But again, this is the finance director had kind of teased us a little bit, you know, thinking about where the monies could be used and coming up with these appropriate line items. Knowing, of course, that within the limits set in the original appropriation ordinance, the finance director does have some wiggle room where he can move monies without specific authorization from us. If they go beyond that limit, then of course he does have to come and get specific legislative approval. But that's where we're here. We can see the last line, 546, is for economic development, which is, we have the next piece of legislation deals with that. Again, we had a teaser about that earlier this evening. And this is, all appropriations are educated guesses, you know, and this perhaps even more so because, again, the window is open very quickly and will slam itself shut very quickly. So this will enable us to get things done.
And if I may add, your presence at City Hall is always welcome, and it could not have been more opportune than that moment, because we were admittedly looking for, you know, how do we do this? We all know what we want to do, well, at least a big vantage point, but so you came just at
providential.
Yes, it was, I was going to go there. And also, again, we administratively have put some work into different items we think we can invest in for the future, because we know this is not going to be the last virus we're ever going to encounter. So we kind of looked at this as how can we kind of provide for safety in the future with touchless items and beefing up our infrastructure for remote work environments and so forth. So that's kind of where we're going with these different appropriations here. So thank you for that. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Sorry, Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Martin.
The only issue I have with the legislation, and it's not really actually, issue with the legislation is a little strong, but it's all I have at my disposal at the moment. The money is coming in very quickly and it's going out very quickly. And therefore, it limits itself to the accountability for this body. I appreciate the fact that we try to make the line items as robust as possible, as opposed to putting it under just miscellaneous, because that would basically escape the accountability of the council. Understanding that the money's coming in and it's going out very quickly, I would like, before the Finance Committee, a robust report on how these monies were spent, just to ensure that they were spent with the correct fiduciary principles that we would expect in general for any appropriations that we put before this body. That oversight, being what it is, will not necessarily be there. There's a certain amount of trust that's being given under this, that we're spending this money wisely and with good stewardship. And so that would be this council member's request, understanding that it'll be after the fact, after the money's gone, and very little we can do about it, but at the very least, it would be nice to have such a report to be able to share with our constituents.
Be happy to do that. Mr. Gates.
Well, there's a great deal of trust from the council for the administration on the expenditure of every single penny. I think about we're talking here, it's a significant amount of money, pushing $300,000, but the light fund is multi-millions. I don't think, well, let me say, this member of council is not going to examine these pennies any more or any less than he examines the expenditures of any other penny on the city treasury.
Understood. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Ordinance number 22, 2020 passes.
Ordinance number 23, 2020, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Richmond Area Chamber of Commerce to assist the city in the planning and administration of CARES Act funds devoted to the Small Business Community Fund to assist in recovery and declaring an emergency.
Move the rules requiring that the ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions, be suspended.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. McLaughlin. The rule requiring the ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
The motion to suspend passes.
move the ordinance be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Roberts for the passage of ordinance number 23, 2020. Discussion. Mr. Gates.
Some marginal notes that I made as I read through this the other day. Section 2, the question I have is, what determines eligible small businesses? I think that we've got an idea what criteria are going to be used. I particularly like the language, the non-discrimination language in section 4 that provides protection by reason of race, color, sex, age, religion, national origin, ancestry, veteran status, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or any other characteristic to the extent protected by law. I did have a question in section 15, law of Ohio. This grant agreement shall be construed and enforced in accordance with the laws of the state of Ohio. That much I get, but then there's the next part. Without giving effect to its conflict of laws principle, and I'm wondering if maybe the law director could give us a brief
I think that's just a
explanation
nutshell
of what that
saying
means.
Ohio is the forum where we're gonna litigate any issue. So if there would be possible removal to another jurisdiction regarding those principles of conflicts or where they should be handled, we're gonna handle in the state of Ohio.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. And I think that was, those are the questions I had.
Mr. Martin.
Mayor, if you as a representative of the administration can kind of walk us through why we should pay them $10,000 to administer this and why we can't administer it ourselves through our economic development office and use that $10,000 towards our own businesses versus taking 10% of that and giving it to another entity to administer it on our behalf.
I'll start out, and this is probably the weakest part of all the reasoning is, this is how Mansfield, Ontario, Lexington are moving forward with it the same way. They're going to use the 10% principle no matter what that amount is. Some of those jurisdictions did not get as much money as we did, so, but 10% is 10%. If a community is giving 20,000, then 2,000 of it would go towards those administrative expenses. I believe the work, as I mentioned, has already been put into this with drawing up the guidelines, coming up with the rubric evaluation, the scoring mechanism. That is something that we did not have to do all on our own. And one of the key things was, as well as them, the chamber handling the scorings and the awardings of these grants, takes the pressure off of us as takes any idea of showing favoritism in the city for whatever reason one may imagine that business A got this instead of business C, only because so-and-so knows so-and-so. This takes it completely out of that realm of any type of accusation of favoritism. And that was kind of a big item to be considered. And there will be a lot of time that goes into this in these gradings. Not only Richland County wide, because we're going to, in a sense, pay them for doing all of Richland County, which will include some Shelby businesses, but also they'll be doing the Shelby business gradings and awards. So I think there's going to be quite a bit of time that goes into that process, and the chamber has stepped up and been willing to do that for us. Yes, sir.
You said it, the time is already going to go into the process. Our businesses are applying for the countywide grant. And then those who don't make the cut are the ones that are going to get this grant. So all the work is already done because of the money that's being given to them by the county. Why could, I'm having a big struggle with it costing 10% of the amount to do work that's already done. It would be like if we charge an administrative fee to the electric department, and then the same work that was being done, recharging another administrative fee to another department. That wouldn't make sense to do that for the exact same amount of work, charging two different departments the same amount. So I'm trying to think, what additional work would they be doing on behalf of our businesses in Shelby that's worth $10,000?
I think there's gonna be a lot of work yet in the future, not only, are we looking, is this somewhat in retrospect what they have done on behalf of our businesses already, that perhaps is an element of that? But I think there'll be quite a bit of work in the whole grading system. And Ms. Griffin is involved in that, of course, trying to touch base with all of our local Shelby businesses to make sure that they apply and get their name on the list. And then we follow up with that as well. But yeah, 10% seems to be the going rate, and other communities are using that same figure. I believe, Mansfield, was it 250? They doing 250, and then 25,000 was their administrative fee. They've already signed it. Mr. Rob.
Does this not fall under the heading of economic development? I think I read that here on the appropriations, economic development, $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Do we not already have a contract with them for economic development?
We have a contract with them for Ms. Griffin as our economic development liaison, yeah.
So we're already paying for economic development.
We're paying for her efforts.
This is under the heading of economic development, which we're already paying for. You understand what Mr. Martin is trying to say here, and I agree with him. Why are we paying $10,000 for somebody when the work's already been done for? I mean, the city used to mow the grass here, and now we have a contractor that does that, so we're paying somebody to do something that, we could be doing ourselves. Where are we gonna end this?
This is pretty much a one-time program under this environment with the COVID-19 relief.
Well, I understand that, but.
So I think when I view economic development, what we're contracting for, if you read that contract that we signed with the Chamber for Ms. Griffin, it's I think a different set of duties that she is performing under that contract. I don't think it really fits under this COVID-19. I'm talking about making up application forms and sending application forms and reviewing application forms, and she cannot, I don't think, if I were her, I would not want to be the one that was solely looking at these businesses and saying, grading these out, you get a 9 in this category or 7. I don't think we want one person doing that. I don't think Ms. Griffin should be the one person doing that. And we were trying to get, so we don't have any personal involvement in it, anything that may come as favoritism. We've been extracted from that, so it can be a very objective evaluation of businesses that do apply, so we can help those businesses. That's the way I see it. Mr. Robbins.
Work has already been done. I just wonder where the money came from to pay for that work. They've already done, certainly already done some things for this. Are they waiting around until after the fact to get our $10,000 and everybody else's to pay for what's already been done?
I did not really talk to Ms. Perry about that, whether, were they burning the midnight oil here? Did they have some sort of overtime expenses? Are they expecting to recoup that? I really don't know that answer. Mr. Martin.
I want everyone to understand my heart. I'm wanting to get to a yes on this. I just have some serious questions to try to get myself to yes. I'm just thinking about what $10,000 could do for a couple small businesses in our community. Do we have any idea how many businesses within our community fall within the parameters that Ms. Gribben spoke to of less than 20 FTEs? I believe that was the term she used. Do we have any idea how many businesses we have within our community that would even be eligible just under that jurisdiction? All the other parameters notwithstanding. And we can ballpark it too, and nobody's under oath here, like, I'm not gonna come back and be like, you told me 19, there's actually 20. But like, just general ballpark.
If you would probably count the, what we used to call like sole proprietors, the 1 and 2 person operation, 1.5 operations, plus the ones that fall between 2 and 20, I would think we'd be around that 20-25 mark. I would think, maybe not. This, you think of the restaurants and so forth that we have around here, would probably fall into that category. But we don't have a break over those, Mr. Crowe.
I believe they also include just contractors and that sort of thing as well, which would greatly increase the number. I sent Jessica a message to see if we can get exact thoughts on that.
Just you guys.
She just texted me and said that she could answer that question if we want to give her a call.
Y'all all right with that? What's their number, Joe?
You may not want to put it on the record, but you need a private telephone number.
Oh,
Suggestion.
good suggestion.
You already forced her to give her address.
Yes, Ms. Griffin. You're live here at the meeting.
Oh, good, good. I had to leave because my husband had to go back to work, but I'm glad you called because I have answers for your questions. I was watching I was listening to the live as I drove home. So it sounds like the question revolves around why are we paying $10,000 for the service plan when you've already created the program? And that's understandable. And yes, we have already created the program and your dollars will dock into that. Each application that we award money to, then there is a whole follow-up. So anyone who is awarded funds through this program, we will then have to collect their financial information and verify all of it, making sure that they actually qualify. After that, they are awarded the grant funds, and then it is going to be the chamber's responsibility and liability, quite frankly, to ensure they spend the funds as they are supposed to do in the case. So we will then go back to them again to pull those records to make sure that they spend it appropriately. When all of that is said and done, these files have to be kept, and then they also have to be audited to make sure that we appropriated the grants properly and that they were spent properly by the businesses. So there is a liability that we take on and an additional expense with the auditing of these files once it's all said and done. So that's where the added expense comes in as we're accepting new funds. So really the cost of running this program goes up with the more grants that we give out.
We have a question. Thank you, Ms. Griffin. We have a question from Councilor Martin.
I have a couple questions, so if you can bear with me, Ms. Griffin. So when you talk about spend appropriately and according to the program, are you talking about guidelines that the chamber has set forth or guidelines that are in that the state of Ohio has set forth?
They're actually guidelines that were established through the CARES Act as far as what those funds can be spent for.
Okay, so can you give me an example of what that would look like for a small business owner?
Yes, so acceptable expenditures include rent, mortgage payments, utility payments. I guess they kind of quantify it as normal business expenses. Things that are not acceptable, they cannot like purchase a vehicle, for example, with these dollars. So there's things they can do and things they cannot do.
And this may be a question that you don't know, but the CARES Act, do they put the responsibility for auditing, whether that's done on the individual getting the money or on the entities giving the money to those businesses?
So the way our contract is worded, and I don't have it in front of me, but to paraphrase, I believe the chamber, by taking these dollars, is kind of taking the liability and the responsibility of ensuring those funds are raised appropriately and further that they're spent appropriately, and that we document that for the files. That way, as we are audited, we being the chamber, we have all of those items in place.
I guess what I'm getting at is if we took that $100,000 and we said, Ms. Gribben, you're our economic development advisor, here's $100,000, we want it spent on small businesses that fall within those parameters. Would we then be open to an audit from the CARES Act, under the CARES Act, or is that just something that we assume is going to take place? Because the reason I'm asking that is I haven't seen that wording where the CARES Act gives that the guidelines for what is acceptable use on spending it, but I don't see where that goes past the governmental entity as far as the audit requirements.
I guess I can't necessarily speak to that other than just, we, in our grant agreement with the business, we refer back to a section, and again, I do not have this in front of me, a section in the CARES Act of what is an eligible business expense for the purpose of them being granted funds through this program. So there is something in the CARES Act that speaks to that, but I do not have it in front of me to tell you what section or part. It would be in the grant agreement with the business, which I believe the mayor has a copy of.
All right, and then to the question of how many eligible businesses do we have in the city of Shelby? Do you have that number as well?
I could not tell you off the top of my head how many would be eligible.
Not eligible is a bad term. Just basically 20 FTEs or less.
Again, off the top of my head, I do not have that number, and I don't want to say the wrong.
Can you give us just a loose ballpark, understanding it's a loose ballpark? The mayor had said 20 to 25 in that range. Is that a decent range, you think?
There are over 200 businesses in the city. Now, how many of those are 20 FTEs or less? I would say, I hate to put a number on it, but it seems like probably half.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Gribben? Hang in there a second. Is there any more discussion in case maybe another question comes up, maybe Ms. Gribben would answer?
A couple of things. The grant application sheet indicated that you had a copy of that, Mayor. Do you happen to have that?
The application, there's a.
Not the application, sorry, the agreement.
Program grant agreement, I do have agreement here. Would you like to to see it. Yes, sir.
I move that we take a, call it a 10-minute recess.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. McLaughlin. We take a 10-minute recess. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yay.
Mr. Rob,
Yay.
Mr. Roberts,
Yay.
Mr. Gates,
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
That motion passes. We take recess at 7:50. No. What's this?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Did they find anything out there last night?
It was drained out, nothing out there.
It was trained out already. He called me at busy night when I told him, I'll call, but they probably won't come out tonight. So when Bryce said they'll probably come out and check it out tomorrow. We meet tomorrow.
He's still-
Good gosh.
There's a couple other areas that look at as well, and the same thing as well, as soon as you go there.
Have a single audit, which is
They're drained out.
significantly more complicated.
Okay.
So that
Are
might be
you-
part
are
of
you-
their thing, whereas
Hands free
we
driving, I suppose.
probably stay under $500,000 this year.
Okay, all right, yeah, just leave it on speaker, then I'll just leave this.
Yeah, so we'll probably use that from that.
Thank you very much.
Well, I know last year we didn't get over 500,000.
Yeah.
500,000.
And your new ID card.
Now.
Yeah, we gotta change them, we gotta put something different on them, so we're gonna do them all at once.
So we made it.
That's why I'm saying here.
Might as well change it.
Yeah, so's mine, yeah, so's mine. We're gonna issue new ones for anybody that wants them. I couldn't get a hold of Bill. Geisinger said he's on social media. Oh, really? I hadn't heard.
Can't answer that.
And like 80 years old.
I was gonna call Schaub. I was gonna call Schaub and ask him, yeah.
You want a number?
No, I think I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna call her and ask, but I hadn't seen him.
Cheryl Kissel too, she stays pretty close. I don't have to move on because I never even, I talk to them on the phone rarely. They always stop at the house when they get out.
I talked to Workman today. John Workman. Yeah,
Non-discrimination.
yeah.
Very popular.
And Fernie. Fernie, Roger. I talked to Fernie.
The Incredible Shrinking Man.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I
Yep.
have a lot of heartburn.
His wife actually spoke to me.
I don't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
I'm
Wow.
saying it's not, but I
It's
have.
crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So.
Last time I saw her, she talked to me for a long time.
Really?
Like we were friends and everything. Like,
Wow.
CARES Act investigators come in and said,
Yeah.
you should have given that money to the chamber.
That's
The
interesting.
chamber didn't do it right, they can come after us.
yeah.
Now, the law says we're reimbursed.
She didn't talk to anybody.
It's called an entity, which I think they are. I felt a lot better when I saw that.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Where'd you see her? Where at?
Yeah, the grocery
Oh,
store.
that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She said, you remember me, right? And I said, oh, yeah. She just went on and on and on. Wow.
I asked Roger if he had an email address.
Talking about an extra 5%.
Immediately. Nope.
Taking all that.
Said nope.
Don't want one.
He probably does. He just doesn't want to be on a list.
Well, and I think 50% is the dollar. That's probably a lot to follow back up, and just sort of all check back in 3 times. So I could see, you know, if we're gonna give.
Yeah, yeah, qualified too, every time.
Versus Mansell giving out 2.
That's Every time I said something to Dave, he's like, I'll call you when we're gonna call.
Well,
I'll call you, but he never did.
we will, we just gotta I got stickers from Kane Graphics. They're vinyl 3/8" stickers, it says the year on it, SPD qualified the year. Just give you a sticker, put it on your thing, you're good to go, so, we just gotta get it done.
That was a plan of mine a long time ago for retirees, but nobody wanted to come in and get their
I know,
ID card.
I know, that's where I'm trying again.
Bernie, or not Bernie, Bailey.
I sent him an email, trying to get him on.
So Roger, why don't you want to do that? Oh, well, no, you do that. It's like, whatever.
Yeah. The last time I saw him, he was complaining about his pension and health care.
Who doesn't?
I don't care.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. Bennett emailed me and asked about the stipend, if the stipend was going away. I don't think that's what it is.
No.
Do they have enrollment annually? Do they have an annual enrollment?
Yeah, they do, and it's coming up.
That's what I figured.
They have a company that administrates that, and nobody's happy with them, and the contract goes through 21, so everybody's bailing on that company and going to Michigan for Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's a little bit more money.
Better.
Before the bridal party.
Yeah. Yep.
It's pretty on serious.
Which is where I'm going this year. I pay $1,700 a month for nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. Gotta have it.
That's a lot.
comes out of session here at 8:10. Mr. Martin.
Mayor, during the recess, I was able to look at this, the grant agreement, and I have some additional thoughts. But before I get to the additional thoughts, we have yet to hear from the sponsor of this ordinance, and I would like to give deference to him and his thoughts about what we've discussed. And maybe he has a point of view that thus far has been lacking in the discourse that we've engaged in this evening. So I would like to ask Councilman Gates if he has any additional information or any other viewpoint that we may be missing.
Mr. Gates.
The question seems to be whether the services that are provided by this contract are included or should be included in the existing contract that we have with the chamber. I don't have that in front of me to do a side-by-side comparison. So that may well be a legitimate question as to whether that's something that they should already be doing. The sticking point seems to be in section 1 about the 90 and 10 split. Both percentage and dollars, $90,000 and $10,000. This contract is an attachment to a piece of legislation, is subject to any amendment, deletions, additions, whatever legislative action council wishes to take. That it could take with the legislation, it could likewise take to an attached contract. So if any of my colleagues feels that he wants to make an amendment to that, have at it.
Ms. Martin.
I do have some additional insight to present just based off of my reading. And again, this is reading over 8 minutes, speed reading. So have with you what it will. The agreement that our businesses will get is an agreement between them and the Richland County COVID-19 Small Business Emergency Relief Grant Program. It's referred all throughout here as the program, and the program grants the funds, and also they agree to be governed by the program guidelines. It states here that it is a grant fund that has been created by the County of Richland in partnership with the Chamber and several community partners in order to assist small businesses throughout Richland County with the financial hardship imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. I have some issues with us being considered partners in the program, but at the same time, the agreement we're entering into is simply with the Richland Area Chamber of Commerce and not the county, and then as partners. It's almost like we're subletting, probably a poor term, but a lawyer I'm not. But we're basically subletting our responsibility here. I do like the fact that there is, it holds us harmless if something goes awry. I guess if they got a bad audit, we would be held harmless. I don't know how well that would hold up against our own audit. You know, they very well could audit us too and say, you shouldn't have done that with that $100,000. I don't know. At the core, there are 2 sticking points that I have. One is the amount. I feel that it is an excessive amount for work done, work that is already, a program that has already been created in partnership with the county itself that we're joining. I would like to see that additional money put back into our own town. Nobody can accuse us of not investing rather heavily in our economic development. That wasn't always the case here in Shelby. When I first came on council, we didn't have nary, two nickels really that we put into economic development after previous issues, right? And then we said, we're going to slowly invest in this, $25,000, and then what we're doing now with our partnerships. So I don't want it to come across as that I don't want to put the money in economic development. I do. That's the reason why I voted to put the $100,000 to economic development. The question is, how much of that should go towards the administrative fees? And then real quick, the other sticking point I do have is on the section 4. Perfectly fine with the language and perfectly fine with the clause. I know it's standard boilerplate with most of these contracts. The issue I have, though, is that we are, in the analysis, we are weighting exactly all those things in the basis of who gets money. I would argue that they're weighting it based off of those disadvantaged, their term, disadvantaged businesses is in violation of section 4. But I'm not their legal counsel. That's just this council member's 2 cents. I don't know how you can say we're not going to discriminate, and then we give more money to those who are different from others in those different categories. That feels like discrimination. So I guess, Mayor, my question would be to you, this contract as it is, if we decide to amend it, and specifically section 1, and then also it would be section 7, how is the chamber going to receive them? That would be good information to have. Would you be able to speak?
I don't think any other jurisdiction has. Up to now, I believe Lexington will be bringing this to their council, I believe, on the 21st, is that?
They had a meeting tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, did they call a special meeting?
I think they had a meeting tonight.
They usually have one through the summer. So they may have called a special one for tonight.
I don't know, I spoke with their law director today, he said he had a council meeting last.
They must have called a meeting. Okay, very good. But anyway, I don't know, Councilman Martin. Let's just see if Jessica's still there. Are you still there, Jessica? Hello? I don't know what that would look like, to be very, very honest with you. Respond.
Our standard for administrative fees has long been 5%. That's kind of been our, I want to say gold standard, but as far as I've been on council, that's been the standard by which we have felt is appropriate and would meet, I'm not going to speak for Councilman Gates, but Councilman Gates has said on several occasions that it meets the audit principles. I just think that is an additional $5,000 that can go to relief of our small businesses, even if it helps one small business is one small business that we can help benefit. And I just, that's kind of where I'm at. But before I make a motion to that effect, I would definitely like to hear from other members of council, because this is a decision that we need to make collectively, not just one member of council having a wild hair, deeming to speak for all of the other council members.
saw Mr. Gates' hand.
Yeah, I don't think it was intended that Mr. Martin has put words in my mouth and is comparing apples and oranges. The administrative fees that we pay from like the light fund, the water fund, park fund, to the general fund, that 5% figure was bandied about at a conference sponsored many years ago by the Auditor of State in a specific situation of that the general funds should not be doing the work for other funds. So it did not address this very specific question of consultants' contracts, which is what this is here. So they're very different. Now, if he wants to make it 5%, you know, throw out an amendment and we'll see what happens with it. But yeah, that, you know, to say that the auditor would be happy or unhappy because it's 10%, I don't believe is the case. Now, if we want to go further and ask about consultants' contracts and what they get, you know, that may well be a question, and not to put him on the spot, but we often do that here at council. That might be something that Mr. Geis would know, because he deals with consultants' contracts quite a bit. Now, when we hire some engineers or architects, sometimes it's for a flat fee, and sometimes it's for a percentage. So, you know, if we're concerned about whether this 10% is good, bad, or different, I think we might have someone here who can guide us about that.
Mr. Geis?
It's pretty standard when doing engineering for any one of our contracts is 10%. And if I also could add, I know this is federal dollars coming down, so I can't speak to CARES Act and how they're funding and they're reporting, but what I can speak to is on the federal highway monies that come. Very, very detailed on all of the bookkeeping, the reporting. ODOT comes and does an audit, and then the state auditors come in, go over ODOT's audit and so forth, and so there is a lot of money that is spent. Just for instance, we just did Smiley Gamble intersection. Our contract with them was for 10%. There's daily records and so forth, and I think what she was talking about, all of the items they have to put into that contract, make sure it's in there, follow up. For instance, you know, you talk about the disadvantaged businesses, so forth. Our consultant who we had out there has to write down the names of the company, who's there that day, is that company name on the truck. So I can going with that experience, I can tell you 10% may not be out of line. Like I said, I can't speak to what exactly their bookkeeping is, but anytime you use federal dollars, that was my experience also when we had a CDBG contract, vast amounts of paperwork and recording. So if it's anything like that, I would say you're good to go.
Mr. Rock?
Thank you, Mr. Geis, for that. But we're not talking about construction contracts here. We're talking about grant awards through a process that's already been established. I have to agree with Mr. Martin that 5% certainly sounds a whole lot better than 10%, but administering this grant ourselves is 0%, and it's not the first grant that the city's ever administered. We have just recently a grant that was administered by the city for a project on West Main Street, a construction project, but the city took applications and awarded grant money to people for a sewer project. So, you know, this is not our first time at that with grant applications. I do have a problem with the $10,000 figure. I would consider something less than that if that comes before council, but the $10,000 figure, as far as I'm concerned, is just way off the mark. Good, you know, it's not what they want; it's what we're willing to pay. What it comes down to.
Mr. Rock? Mr. Geis?
Thank you, Mr. Geis, for that. But we're not talking about construction contracts here. We're talking about grant awards through a process that's already been established.
end of the day, they have to, the signature page requires a signature from the Richland Area Chamber and ourselves. And I just don't know if that signature would go on the paper with a different amount. I just don't know. You don't on the signature page itself. Mr. Gates.
Mayor, I move the resolution, the ordinance be postponed to the next regular meeting of the city council.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. McLaughlin to postpone ordinance number 23, 2020 to the next regular meeting of city council. Discussion? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, I probably don't need to say this, but I'm sure that you will be in contact with the Chamber of Commerce. I would request that Mrs. Perry attend the next regular meeting of city council.
Any further discussion? This will be a vote to postpone to the next regular meeting. Roll call?
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
The motion to postpone passes.
Resolution number 40, 2020. Authorizing the mayor as Director of Public Service to enter into an agreement with DCC Ohio, Inc. to make repairs to the East Whitney Avenue Bridge and the West Whitney Avenue Bridge.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. McLaughlin for the passage of resolution number 40, 2020. Discussion? Mr. Martin.
It has been brought to my attention, and I apologize for the late notice on this. It has been brought to my attention that we would, while it will be possible to get it done before, during this season, before the next season, it would be preferable to make this by emergency. And so with that, I would move to put the emergency language within the resolution.
Second.
And my understanding then, on the heading, you would add after the word bridge, make that period a comma, and declaring an emergency?
Correct.
As your part of your name there.
And then the therefore be resolved. I don't have the language in front of me.
Yeah, the previous ones. A 2/3 majority elected there to inserting the words a 2/3 in parentheses, 2/3. Just above section 1. That is the intent of your amendment to add the emergency language.
Is there anything that needs to go into section 3 for an emergency? I don't know if it does. I think, yeah.
Mr. Rice, do you want?
Yeah, I'll put that language, if that passes, that's no problem.
We'll put the typical emergency language.
There's language, in like ordinance 2220, that it's an order to be resolution, but
Yeah, I think it
see
says,
section 4 that's deemed an emergency.
and therefore shall be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think those are the three parts of the resolution ordinance that speak to an emergency. And again, I apologize, I don't have that done in advance. That's something that was brought up.
Okay, so we have the multiple amendments by Mr. Martin, and we've you've all heard those, and the heading changed and declaring emergency just before the enacting clauses, a 2/3 majority inserted, and then the law director would put in the emergency language in section 3, that if you wish to amend resolution number 40, 2020 in that fashion. Okay. Discussion? Mr. Martin?
Mr. Ensman can speak to exactly why this needs to be an emergency and the specifics.
Okay, thank you. After the legislation was prepared and sent to the law director, it was brought to my attention by the service department superintendent that it would probably be best to make this emergency. I already had it submitted. I think it's days off prior to the weekend, so I was unable to make that change. In conversation with the service department superintendent this morning, he kind of reiterated that it would probably be best due to the change in the seasons that are coming forth at us. I spoke with the president of BCC. He responded back to me. He said he can make it work if it's not an emergency, but he stated, I can make that work. It is not best to wait so late, but it may require additional cure times if we have to make that wait period. So we're dealing with the concrete, we have the changes in the seasons coming, the days are getting shorter. If we have to wait 30 days, it's going to put us into the middle of October. The time you can actually start would be probably the second full week, and it could be a little hard for him to work into the schedule to make sure it could be completed as needed. We're going to talk about bridges, we're talking about concrete work, and I think it needs to be done when the best available times are at the forefront of time right now. So the times are of the essence. Get the work done.
Thank you. Any further discussion on these amendments to make this into an emergency resolution? Then we're voting on those amendments. Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
The motion to amend passes. Further discussion? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, in the fine print, it says that BCC Ohio Inc. is a union contractor. Do we know what unions represent his employees?
Mr. Henson.
I do not. We can reach the president by phone call?
No, it's not that critical.
No, I do not.
Just for my curiosity, Mayor. I would like to know, but there's no urgency.
Maybe you can check an email.
Sure.
Very good. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Gates.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
All right, thank you. Resolution number 40, 2020 passes. We go to miscellaneous business. Is there any miscellaneous business to be brought before council this evening? I think it's on Mr. Gates' hand first.
No, I mean,
All right, Mr. McLaughlin.
I just wanted to touch on the bid petition quickly. There was a meeting that we had in the last couple of weeks that I did miss, but this past month, if I didn't tell you already, I walked the Black Fork River from State Street out to Plymouth Spring Mill with Matt Wallace of the Christian County Soil and Water Conservancy. And he counted what he thought was some trees that might end up falling into the river or cause some restrictions, and he counted some log jams as well. And so currently they have counted about 1,000 trees from here through, I think, Geisinger Road Bridge, about 1,000 trees, additional trees that they've identified that should come out, as well as 12 major blockages of the Black Fork River. So the next meeting is set for September 17th at 5 o'clock over Richland County Soil and Water. And so that's the update. Any questions?
Mr. Martin.
And the golf carts.
Oh, we've had someone else. I think y'all had an email from someone concerning golf carts, and so Mrs. Wechter. So I'm going to relate to her that if she would like to come to the safety committee, I'll let her know when that is to discuss her feelings
miscellaneous business? Mr. Gates.
Mayor, I was saddened this weekend to learn of the death of Terry Zerker. Mr. Zerker served many, many years as a teacher here in the Shelby City School District, and also as a track and cross-country coach. I first knew Mr. Zerker, which is how I would have addressed him back when I was a student at the Shelby Junior High School. That's how long ago that was. Later, he and I were colleagues at the junior high when I was on staff there. And later, we were colleagues after his retirement from the Shelby School District, and he was a tutor at Pioneer Career Technology Center. An outstanding teacher, an outstanding coach, an outstanding person, an outstanding family man. And the community is lessened by his passing. And I'm sure that everyone here joins with me in extending our sympathies to the Zerker family. Thank you.
Thank you, well said, thank you. Any further miscellaneous business? Mr. Gates.
Mayor and the council adjourned.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gates and a second by Mr. Martin for adjournment. Roll call, please.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yay.
Mr. Rob,
Yay.
Mr. Roberts,
Yay.
Mr. Gates,
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Council adjourns at 8:36. Thank you, gentlemen.